In a village cradled by the foothills of the Carpathian Mountains, there lived a merchant named Victor, a man known for his unyielding honesty and a gaze as steady as the mountain peaks above. He was married to Sophia, a woman whose beauty seemed to shift with the seasons, fiery and vibrant in the summer, soft and serene in the winter. Together they were the heart of the village, a pair that others spoke of with admiration, even envy. But love, as any poet will tell you, is as delicate as a spider's web, beautiful and intricate, yet so easily torn by the smallest disruption. Victor spent much of his time traveling, his wagons laden with fine silks, exotic spices, and trinkets from lands far beyond the villagers' imaginations. He trusted Sophia implicitly to manage their home and affairs while he was away, never doubting her devotion. Yet, in his absence, a shadow crept into their lives. It came in the form of Davor, a traveling minstrel whose voice could melt the coldest, of hearts and whose tales brought laughter to even the weariest faces. He arrived in the village during one of Victor's longer expeditions, setting up camp near the riverbank, where his songs floated like ghosts into the night. Sophia was drawn to Davor's fire-lit gatherings, her curiosity piqued by the world he painted with his stories, a world so different from the one she had known. And slowly, like the first crack in an ice-covered stream, her loyalty to Victor began to waver. At first it was innocent, a stolen moment by the river, a shared laugh over tales of distant lands. But Davor, ever the charmer, knew the power of his words. He spoke of freedom, of the constraints of duty, of love that burned like wildfire, uncontained and consuming. Sophia found herself ensnared, her heart tugged between the steady reliability of Victor and the tempestuous allure of Davor. When Victor returned, his home felt different. The warmth was still there, but it carried an undercurrent he couldn't name. He noticed Sophia's gaze lingering too long on the horizon, her laughter a little too bright when Davor's name was mentioned. Victor's heart, so sure and steadfast, began to fill with doubt. One evening he followed Sophia to the river, his steps silent as he approached. He found her there, her hands clasped in Davor's, their voices low and filled with words Victor dared not decipher. The scene struck him like a hammer, the foundation of his life crumbling in an instant. But Victor was no man for public displays of rage. He confronted Sophia privately, his voice trembling not with anger, but with heartbreak. "Why, Sophia?" he asked, his eyes searching hers for a truth he might still cling to. Sophia's tears fell freely as she confessed her feelings, torn between guilt and the intoxicating pull of Davor's world. "You've given me everything, Victor, but I feel as though I've lived half a life. With Davor, I feel free." Victor stood silent for a long time, his heart a battlefield of love, betrayal, and the desire to understand. At last he spoke, his voice heavy with sorrow, but also a surprising calm. "If freedom is what you seek, Sophia, then I will not chain you. But know this, freedom comes with a price, and it is not always as sweet as it seems." Sophia chose to leave with Davor, and the village whispered of her decision for years to come. Victor, though shattered, rebuilt his life, his dignity intact. He channeled his pain into his trade, traveling farther and meeting new faces, finding solace in the stories of others who had loved and lost. As for Sophia and Davor, their love burned, brightly but briefly, like a candle caught in a draught. The freedom Sophia longed for came with a loneliness she hadn't anticipated, and Davor's restless spirit was not one to settle. She returned to the village years later, aged not by time, but by regret, to find Victor gone, his home a distant memory. And so, the tale of Victor and Sophia became a cautionary story told by the villagers, a reminder that love, like a precious gem, must be polished and protected lest it slip through careless fingers. Years passed since Sophia's departure with Davor, and Victor had become a shadow of his former self, hardened by sorrow and solitude. His trade expanded, but his heart remained a desolate wasteland. Yet, beneath his quiet exterior, a plan began to take shape, a plan to reclaim his dignity and make those who wronged him feel the weight of their choices. Victor learned that Sophia and Davor had settled in a bustling port town far from the village. Their initial days were filled with passion, but as the spark dimmed, their life grew tumultuous. Davor's charm, once irresistible, turned hollow, and his wandering ways left Sophia isolated and yearning for the stability she had forsaken. Armed with this knowledge, Victor began his scheme. He hired skilled spies to feed him details of their lives, every triumph and every struggle. When the moment was ripe, Victor arrived in the port town under the guise of a wealthy foreign merchant. With his refined manners and undeniable presence, he quickly ingratiated himself with the local elite, weaving himself into the fabric of the town's society. It wasn't long before Sophia heard whispers of the enigmatic merchant whose caravans brought treasures from across the continent. She couldn't have known it was Victor. His appearance, once rugged from years of travel, had transformed. His beard was neatly trimmed, his clothes were finer than she had ever seen, and his demeanor exuded authority. Victor orchestrated their meeting at a grand banquet, ensuring Sophia would see him from afar before he approached. Her shock was palpable when their eyes met, and her cheeks flushed with a mixture of shame and longing. Davor, oblivious to their history, greeted Victor warmly, eager to charm the wealthy merchant into sponsorship for his faltering performances. With a calmness that belied his inner storm, Victor played his role to perfection. He lavished attention on Davor, financing his shows and introducing him to influential patrons. To Sophia, he was distant yet polite, his indifference more cutting than any harsh word could be. But Victor's revenge wasn't mere humiliation. No, his plan was far more intricate. He knew Davor's weakness for gambling and ensured he had ample opportunities to indulge. Over time, Davor sank into debt, borrowing heavily to maintain the lifestyle Victor had helped him build. When Davor's debts reached a breaking point, Victor made his move. He bought the debts from the creditors and presented Davor with an ultimatum: surrender his possessions and leave the town, or face public disgrace. Davor, stripped of his bravado, fled under the cover of night, leaving Sophia behind without so much as a farewell. Now alone and destitute, Sophia approached Victor, her pride shattered. She begged for forgiveness, her voice trembling as she recounted her regrets and the emptiness that had consumed her since their parting. Victor listened, his expression unreadable, until she fell silent. "You speak of regret, Sophia," he said, his tone cold, but not unkind. "But regret does not undo betrayal. You made your choice, and I made mine." Sophia's tears fell freely, but Victor did not waver. He provided her with a modest sum, enough to start anew but far from the life of luxury she had known. "Take this," he said, not as a token of forgiveness, but as a reminder of what was lost. With that, Victor turned and walked away, his steps steady, his heart lighter than it had been in years. He did not look back, for he had no need. The past was a chapter closed, its pain transformed into strength. And so, Victor's tale became one of resilience and retribution, a reminder that even the deepest wounds can be mended through determination and self-respect. The town spoke of him with admiration, and his story served as a warning. Betrayal may wound, but it can also awaken, a power greater than any heartbreak. Though Victor believed his revenge complete, the emptiness in his heart lingered. The triumph of outmaneuvering Davor and Sophia offered little solace, and he found himself questioning the purpose of it all. Was revenge truly enough to heal the wound of betrayal? As Victor continued his merchant trade, his reputation for intelligence and cunning grew. His caravans expanded to distant lands, and his wealth reached heights he had never imagined. Yet wealth and power were cold companions. In quiet moments, he wondered whether his life had become a monument to his pain rather than a celebration of survival. One fateful day, as his caravan prepared to leave a bustling desert city, Victor encountered a peculiar figure, a sage with eyes like ancient embers. The man approached him, unbidden, and said, "You carry the weight of betrayal and revenge, but these burdens will lead you to a crossroads." Intrigued and unsettled, Victor asked, "What do you mean, old man?" The sage smiled knowingly. "Revenge is a fire that consumes both the giver and the receiver. If you seek peace, you must decide whether to let the flames die or feed them further." Victor dismissed the encounter as ramblings, yet the words lingered in his mind. He resolved to move forward with his life, focusing on building alliances and expanding his trade empire. But fate, it seemed, was not done testing him. Years later, Victor found himself in a small coastal town where whispers reached his ears that Sophia was there, alone and struggling to survive. Curiosity, perhaps tinged with lingering feelings, drove him to investigate. He found her in a humble dwelling, worn and weary, her once vibrant spirit dimmed. Sophia was shocked to see Victor, but did not plead or cry as she had before. Instead, she simply said, "You've come to see the ruin of your work, haven't you? If it brings you peace, then so be it." Her words struck Victor deeply. He realized that his revenge had not only punished Sophia, but also hardened his own heart. For years, he had thought himself victorious, yet standing before her, he felt no triumph, only sorrow. "Peace," Victor said, his voice low, "is a gift I have not yet found." He hesitated, then added, "But perhaps it is time I sought it differently." In an act that surprised even himself, Victor extended an offer to Sophia, a chance to rebuild her life. He provided her with resources and connections, ensuring she could stand on her own feet. It was not forgiveness, but it was a step toward releasing the chains of their shared past. Sophia accepted, her gratitude genuine but tempered by the knowledge that their bond was forever altered. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "It's worth, Victor. I'm sorry. Truly." Their paths diverged once more, but this time Victor felt a measure of peace. He realized that revenge, while satisfying in the moment, had only deepened his scars. By choosing compassion, not for Sophia, but for himself, he began to heal in ways he had never thought possible. And so Victor's tale evolved from one of betrayal and revenge to one of redemption and self-discovery. The towns he visited spoke of him not only as a brilliant merchant, but also as a man who had turned his pain into wisdom. Years passed, and Victor's empire flourished. He became a man of renown, feared by his rivals, and revered by those who sought his favor. Yet despite his outward success, his nights were haunted by dreams of the past. Sophia's tears, divorce, humiliation, and the hollow victory that had left him colder than before. One evening, as he dined alone in his grand estate, a messenger arrived with a letter. The seal bore the mark of a noble house from a distant kingdom. Breaking the wax, Victor read the message, his brows furrowing. It was an invitation to a grand gathering of merchants, nobles, and influential figures. The host, Baron Arnaud, a powerful man whose name was whispered with both admiration and fear. But what caught Victor's attention was a note scrawled at the bottom. "Your old friends Sophia and Davor are expected guests." The words ignited something in Victor, a spark of curiosity mingled with the embers of old grudges. He accepted the invitation, his mind already strategizing. The gathering was a spectacle of opulence, held in the Baron's sprawling estate. Victor arrived, his presence commanding as he navigated the gilded halls. It wasn't long before he spotted them. Sophia was a shadow of her former self. Her beauty faded, but her eyes still carrying a trace of the fire he had once loved. Davor, ever the performer, moved through the crowd with exaggerated charm, though his clothes betrayed his struggles, fine but outdated, a man desperately clinging to appearances. Their eyes met, and Victor saw the flicker of recognition in Sophia's gaze. She froze, her hand tightening around her goblet. Davor, oblivious, approached Victor with a wide grin, his voice dripping with false warmth. "Victor, my old friend," Davor exclaimed, extending a hand. Victor took it, his grip firm enough to unsettle. "Friend," he replied, his tone cold, yet polite. "I didn't expect to see you here." Their exchange was brief, but Victor's mind worked quickly. He observed the strained dynamic between Sophia and Davor, noting how her gaze lingered on Victor, a mixture of guilt and something unspoken. The night unfolded, and Victor bided his time. As the Baron introduced the evening's entertainment, Victor's suspicions were confirmed. Davor was to perform. The once charismatic minstrel now stood before the crowd, his songs tired and his stories uninspired. The audience's polite applause was tinged with pity. After the performance, Victor approached the Baron, whispering a proposal. The Baron, intrigued, agreed. Moments later, Victor took the stage. "My dear friends," he began, his voice commanding, "allow me to share a tale, a true story of betrayal, revenge, and the lessons it brings." He spoke of a man who loved deeply, only to be betrayed by the very heart he trusted. He painted vivid scenes of heartbreak and calculated retribution, his words captivating the audience. Though he never named Sophia or Davor, the parallels were unmistakable. As Victor's tale concluded, the crowd erupted in applause. Davor paled, and Sophia's eyes filled with tears. She fled the room, unable to face the weight of her choices laid bare before strangers. Victor found her in the garden, trembling beneath the moonlight. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Sophia whispered, "Was this your revenge, Victor? To humiliate us before the world?" Victor's expression softened, and he sighed. "No, Sophia. This was not revenge. It was a reckoning, a way to lay the past to rest." Sophia turned to him, her eyes pleading. "And now? What will you do with us?" Victor's gaze held hers, the anger of years past replaced with a quiet resolve. "Nothing. You and Davor have already paid the price for your choices. I will not be your jailer any longer." He left her there in the garden, returning to the grand hall with a sense of finality. For the first time in years, Victor felt the weight of his past lift, leaving space for something new, perhaps forgiveness, perhaps simply peace. Months after the grand gathering, Victor found himself haunted by the echoes of his actions. His calculated humiliation of Sophia and Davor had brought him fleeting satisfaction, but it also stirred something deeper, a realization that the cycle of pain he perpetuated had no end. He had severed ties with his past, but the scars remained. One evening, as he reviewed trade ledgers in his study, a letter arrived carried by a messenger with trembling hands. The seal was unmarked, but the handwriting was familiar. Victor opened it, his heart sinking as he read, "Victor, I write not to beg, nor to rekindle what was lost, but to warn you. The Baron has darker ambitions, and your success has made you a target. He manipulates those he entertains, using their weaknesses against them. Beware, for you are now a piece in his game. Sophia." The letter was unsigned, but Victor recognized her penmanship. A chill ran down his spine. The Baron, whose hospitality had seemed so generous, had always been a figure of shadowed motives. Victor's instincts told him the warning was genuine, and he decided to investigate. Over the following weeks, Victor uncovered disturbing truths. The Baron, a man of immense power, had been exploiting those who attended his gatherings, leveraging secrets to control them. Debts were called in at strategic moments, rivals mysteriously disappeared, and fortunes were quietly funneled into the Baron's coffers. Victor's own empire had grown too large to escape notice, and he realized he had been drawn into a dangerous web. The Baron's interest in him wasn't mere camaraderie, it was a calculated move to bring Victor under his thumb. Seeking allies, Victor reached out to others who had suffered under the Baron's manipulations. Among them was an unexpected figure, Davor. Broken and embittered by his fall from grace, Davor was eager for redemption. Though their partnership was uneasy, both men recognized the need to dismantle the Baron's power. Sophia, too, became part of their plans. She had remained in the Baron's circle, tolerated for her beauty and charm, but underestimated by those who sought to control her. With her insight into the Baron's dealings, she became their informant, risking her safety to expose his schemes. The final confrontation came at another of the Baron's lavish gatherings. Victor, Davor, and Sophia executed their plan with precision. Victor orchestrated a series of business moves that revealed the Baron's corruption, while Sophia planted evidence that exposed his darkest secrets to his closest allies. Davor, once a performer, used his skills to sway the crowd, turning whispers into a tide of dissent. As the Baron attempted to maintain control, his empire crumbled beneath the weight of betrayal and exposed truths. In the chaos, the Baron confronted Victor, his eyes burning with fury. "You think this is victory?" he spat. "You are no better than me. You manipulate, you deceive. You are just another predator." Victor met his gaze, his voice steady. "Perhaps. But the difference is this. I do not seek to control. I seek only to be free of your shadows." With the Baron's downfall, Victor reclaimed his autonomy. Davor, humbled by his part in the plan, chose to leave the city, seeking a simpler life, far from the machinations of power. Sophia, free at last from the Baron's grip, chose a different path, one of quiet atonement. As for Victor, he stood once more at a crossroads. The cycle of revenge had run its course, leaving him weary but unbroken. He resolved to leave the world of power plays and grand schemes, seeking a quieter life where the echoes of the past could no longer reach him. And thus Victor's tale concludes, not with triumph, but with a hard-won peace. The journey of betrayal. And revenge transformed him, leaving scars that whispered lessons only the broken can understand. Victor retired to a secluded village nestled in the mountains, far from the intrigue and ambitions of the city. There he built a modest home and devoted himself to simpler pursuits, tending a garden, aiding the local community, and reflecting on the path that had led him here. Despite his retreat, the lessons of his past followed him like a shadow. The villagers, curious about the enigmatic man who had once commanded an empire, often sought his advice. Victor shared his wisdom sparingly, his words tinged with the weight of experience. He became a quiet mentor, helping the villagers navigate disputes and ambitions with fairness and insight. One day, as the first snow of winter began to fall, a visitor arrived at his door. It was Sophia, wrapped in a cloak that could not entirely shield her from the biting wind. Her face, though lined with age and hardship, still carried the determination that had once captivated him. "I've come to thank you," she said, her voice steady but soft, "for saving me from the Baron and for giving me the chance to rebuild my life." Victor invited her inside, and over a pot of tea they spoke. Not as adversaries or lovers, but as two souls who had weathered the storms of life. Sophia shared, how she had become a teacher in a nearby town, helping children learn to read and write. Her work, though humble, had brought her a sense of purpose she had never known. "I used to think power and wealth were everything," Sophia admitted, "but losing them taught me what truly matters. I've spent so long trying to make amends, not just to you, but to myself." Victor listened, his heart heavy with emotions he could not name. When she finished, he said, "We cannot change the past, Sophia. But we can decide what we do with its lessons. Perhaps that is all the redemption we can hope for." Sophia nodded, her eyes glistening. "And you, Victor? Have you found peace?" He looked out the window, where the snow blanketed, the earth in a serene, unbroken white. "I'm learning," he replied. "Every day I'm learning." Years later, when Victor's hair had turned silver and his step had slowed, he wrote his story, a tale of love, betrayal, revenge, and redemption. He titled it "The Ashes of Ambition" and left it for the world to find, hoping that others might learn from his journey without walking the same painful path. In the end, Victor's legacy was not his wealth or his power, but the wisdom he passed on. His name faded into history, but his story endured, a reminder that even the deepest wounds can give rise to understanding, and that the road to peace often begins with letting go. And so, dear listener, Victor's tale comes to its quiet close, not with a roar but with a whisper, a life transformed not by revenge, but by the courage to face what lay beyond it. Years had passed since Sophia and Victor parted for the second time, both having chosen paths of redemption and reflection. Victor, now living a life of simplicity in the mountains, thought the turmoil of his past was behind him. But one winter evening, a young messenger arrived at his door with a letter. The seal was unfamiliar, but the message was unmistakably Sophia's handwriting. "Victor, I write with a heavy heart and a shame that has haunted me. I have fallen again into the web of my own flaws. I betrayed the man who trusted me, who gave me a second chance. I do not seek your forgiveness or your intervention. I seek only your wisdom. Please, if you can, grant me a meeting. I am staying in the village of Elmshire, at the Travelers. Rest in. I will wait for 1 week. Sophia." The letter's tone was desperate, filled with regret and vulnerability. Victor debated whether to respond. He had worked hard to distance himself from the chaos of his former life, yet a part of him felt compelled to see her, not out of love, but out of a sense of unfinished business. When Victor arrived in Elmshire, he found Sophia in a modest room at the inn. She looked older, her once proud demeanor now shadowed by guilt. They sat in silence for a moment before she spoke. "I betrayed him, Victor," she confessed, tears welling in her eyes. "A good man, kind and decent. I thought I had changed, but I let myself fall for another. And now I've lost everything again." Victor studied her, his expression unreadable. "Why, Sophia?" he asked. "You had rebuilt your life. Why risk it all?" She shook her head, her voice trembling. "I don't know. Maybe I never learned how to be content. Maybe I feared the quiet stability I had found. Or maybe I'm just broken." Victor sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You've made your choices, Sophia, and now you must live with their consequences. But what is it you want from me? To absolve you? To guide you?" She looked up at him, desperation in her gaze. "I want to understand why I keep destroying what I build, and I want to stop." Over the next few days, Victor and Sophia spoke at length, revisiting the moments that had shaped her life and choices. Victor challenged her to confront her patterns, to see the damage they caused not just to others, but to herself. But Victor, too, faced his own truths. He realized that his life of solitude was not the peace he had sought, but an escape from the vulnerability of connection. Their conversations became a mirror, reflecting their shared humanity and flaws. As Victor prepared to leave Elmshire, He left Sophia with words that were both a challenge and a hope. Change is not a single moment, Sophia. It is a choice made every day, in every decision. If you truly want to stop, you must confront the parts of yourself you fear the most. Sophia nodded, her expression one of determination tempered by uncertainty. Thank you, Victor, for not turning away. The tale does not end with Sophia's redemption or Victor's contentment, but with a question. Can those who are deeply flawed ever truly change? Or is their struggle itself the journey that defines them? Months passed after Victor left Elmshire, and though he resumed his quiet life in the mountains, Sophia's plight lingered in his thoughts. He often wondered whether she had heeded his words or if she had succumbed to the patterns that had plagued her. One spring morning, as Victor tended his garden, a visitor arrived, a man whose presence radiated both urgency and despair. Introducing himself as Elias, the visitor was none other than the man Sophia had betrayed. She spoke of you, Victor, Elias said, his voice trembling. Said you were the only person who truly understood her. I've come to ask, why? Why? Does she do it? Victor regarded the man carefully, seeing in him the raw pain he had once felt. Sophia's actions come from a place of fear, he said. Fear of being vulnerable, fear of being hurt, and perhaps a fear of happiness itself. But that fear doesn't excuse the damage she's done. Elias nodded, his jaw tightening. I loved her. I gave her everything and she shattered it. Do you think she can ever change? Victor hesitated, the weight of his own experiences pressing on him. Change is possible, he said at last. But it's not something that happens easily or quickly. She has to want it more than anything else. Elias stayed for several days, and Victor shared his own story, his betrayal, his revenge, and the hollow victory it brought. The two men, connected by their shared pain, found a measure of solace in their conversations. Meanwhile, Sophia, now alone and deeply introspective, began to confront the truths Victor had urged her to face. She sought out a healer in a nearby town, not for physical ailments, but for guidance in understanding her own mind and heart. The healer, an elderly woman named Maris, was known for her wisdom and compassion. You carry wounds that have never healed, Maris told Sophia, and you've inflicted those wounds on others in an attempt to escape your own pain. If you want to change, you must stop running and face what lies within. Sophia began a difficult journey of self-reflection, uncovering the fears and insecurities that had driven her actions. She realized that her betrayals were not born of malice, but of a desperate need to feel alive, to chase the fleeting thrill of passion. Months turned into years, and Sophia's path gradually intersected once more with those she had hurt. She wrote letters to both Elias and Victor, not to ask for forgiveness, but to offer an apology that was genuine and unadorned. Elias, who had rebuilt his life and found love again, chose not to respond. His silence was not born of anger, but of a desire to leave the past behind. Victor, however, replied. His letter was brief but heartfelt. Sophia, your words carry the weight of truth, and for that I respect you. The path you walk is not an easy one, but it is yours to walk. I wish you strength and peace. Victor. In the twilight of their lives, Victor and Sophia met one last time. She had become a mentor to others, helping those who struggled with their own inner battles. Victor, still tending his garden and offering wisdom to his village, found contentment in his simplicity. As they sat beneath the shade of an ancient oak, they spoke not of the past, but of the lessons it had taught them. Their connection, once fraught with pain and betrayal, had transformed into something unexpected: understanding. And so, their story ends not with grand resolutions, but with quiet growth, a reminder that even the most broken among us can find a way to mend, and that forgiveness, whether given or withheld, is but one part of the greater journey toward peace. Years after Victor and Sophia's last meeting, Victor had returned to a life of peace, or so he thought. His reputation as a man who once commanded power and respect in the city had long since faded, and he embraced the quiet anonymity of his mountain village. But the past has a way of resurfacing, especially when wounds are left to fester. One autumn evening, as the village prepared for its harvest festival, a stranger arrived. Clad in a fine cloak and bearing a striking resemblance to someone Victor had once known, the man introduced himself as Luca, Davor's son. "I've come to speak with you about my father," Luca began, his voice carrying both respect and an undercurrent of accusation. "You destroyed him, didn't you? Took everything from him and left him a broken man." Victor's eyes narrowed as he studied the young man. There was a fire in Luca's gaze, the kind born of anger and a need for answers. "Your father destroyed himself," Victor replied evenly. "His choices led to his ruin. I only ensured justice." Luca's jaw tightened. "Justice or revenge? My father always spoke of you, not with hatred but with regret. He said you were a man he once admired, but that you couldn't let go of your pain." Luca's arrival unsettled Victor, stirring memories he had long tried to bury. The young man stayed in the village, working alongside the locals and spending his evenings questioning Victor about the events that had shaped his life. At first, Victor was guarded, but over time he began to share his story. He told Luca of Sophia's betrayal, Davor's complicity, and the calculated revenge that followed. He spoke of the hollow victory it brought him and the years he spent grappling with the emptiness it left behind. Luca listened intently, his anger softening as he began to understand the complexity of Victor's actions. "You sought justice," he said one evening. "But did you ever find peace?" Victor hesitated. "No," he admitted. "Revenge consumed me, and when it was done I was left with nothing but ashes. It took years to rebuild myself, and even now I wonder if I truly succeeded." Luca's presence in the village became a catalyst for change. His probing questions forced Victor to confront the lingering shadows of his past. Meanwhile, Luca began to see his father in a new light, not as a victim, but as a man whose flaws had shaped his downfall. But the story took an unexpected turn when Sophia arrived, uninvited and unannounced. Now an older woman, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that belied her tumultuous past. She had heard of Luca's journey and felt compelled to join him. "I came to face the consequences of my actions," she told Victor. "For years, I've lived with the guilt of what I did. To you, to Davor, to myself. If this is to be a reckoning, let it be complete." The three of them, Victor, Sophia, and Luca, sat together beneath the autumn sky, their conversation stretching long into the night. They spoke of betrayal and forgiveness, of revenge and redemption, and of the legacies they each carried. In the end, it was Luca who provided the final insight. "Revenge destroys the one who seeks it as much as the one it's aimed at," he said. "But forgiveness, true forgiveness, has the power to break that cycle." Victor, moved by the wisdom of the younger man, found himself letting go of the last remnants of his anger. For the first time, he extended an olive branch to Sophia, not out of obligation, but out of a genuine desire to heal. Sophia, humbled by his gesture, accepted it. And though their paths had diverged long ago, they parted that evening with a sense of closure neither had thought possible. As for Luca, he left the village with a renewed sense of purpose. He carried with him the lessons of Victor's and Sophia's lives, determined to forge his own path, one free from the shadows of the past. And so, the story of revenge came full circle, its fiery passion tempered by the quiet strength of forgiveness. Victor, at last, found peace, knowing that the legacy he left behind was one of understanding rather than bitterness. Months after Luca departed, Victor found himself reflecting deeply on the transformation he had experienced. The cycle of revenge had been broken, yet the lessons it carried remained vivid in his mind. He began to write, not for the world, but for himself. A chronicle of his life, the betrayals he had endured, the revenge he had sought, and the peace he had ultimately found. As he wrote, villagers occasionally stopped by, seeking his advice or simply sharing stories. Victor listened more than he spoke, his perspective shaped by the wisdom he had gained. The tales of others reminded him that betrayal and forgiveness were not unique to him, but universal struggles faced by many. Sophia, too, began a new chapter in her life. Freed from the weight of her past, she moved to a nearby town where she started a small school for children. Her dedication to teaching and mentoring young minds became her atonement, a way of giving back to a world she felt she had wronged. Though her heart bore scars, Sophia found solace in the laughter of children and the knowledge that she was helping to shape a brighter future. On occasion, she would visit Victor, bringing him news of the outside world and seeking his counsel on challenges she faced. Their meetings, once tinged with tension, became moments of quiet companionship. Luca's path took him to distant lands, where he pursued a career as a mediator, resolving disputes among merchants, nobles, and commoners alike. His ability to see the humanity in all sides, coupled with the lessons he had learned from Victor and Sophia, made him a respected figure. One day, while negotiating a particularly contentious deal, Luca was asked how he remained so calm in the face of anger and resentment. He smiled and said, "Because I have seen the cost of vengeance, and I have learned that peace is the only victory worth striving for." Years later, Victor's writings, collected into a manuscript titled The Cost of Betrayal, were discovered by a traveling scholar who recognized their value. The stories, though deeply personal, resonated with universal truths about human nature, revenge, and redemption. The scholar published the work, and it became a quiet success, inspiring readers to reflect on their own lives. Sophia, upon reading the book, wrote to Victor, "Your words have touched more lives than you will ever know. Thank you for sharing your truth with the world. It has been an honor to know you." Victor, now in the twilight of his years, read her letter with a bittersweet smile. He had not sought fame or recognition, but knowing that his story had brought meaning to others was a comfort he had not expected. In the end, the tale of Victor, Sophia, and Luca became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Their lives, once shaped by betrayal and revenge, became examples of how understanding and forgiveness could break even the darkest cycles. And so, their story reaches its conclusion, a reminder that even the most painful journeys can lead to redemption, and that peace, while elusive, is always worth pursuing. Years had passed since Victor, Sophia, and Luca found their separate paths to peace. The village that Victor had once considered his sanctuary had grown, expanding with new faces and new challenges. But even in the tranquil rhythm of everyday life, the remnants of old actions lingered, like whispers on the wind. One autumn evening, as Victor sat on the porch of his modest home, watching the mountains bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of his property. It was an older man, his hair streaked with gray, his features weathered by time and hardship. Victor stood, recognizing the man before he spoke. "Davor," he said, his voice steady but his heart stirring with an old familiar tension. Davor, the man whose ambition and treachery had once brought Victor to the brink of destruction, stood before him now, no longer the power-hungry figure of his youth, but a broken shadow of the man he had been. "I knew you would be here," Davor said, his voice rasping. "I've heard about your life, Victor, your retreat from the world, your peace. But peace, it seems, is a luxury for those who haven't lost everything." Victor narrowed his eyes, sensing the bitterness in Davor's words. "What do you want, Davor?" The older man sighed, a hollow sound that carried the weight of regret. "I want to make amends," he said, the words like ash in his mouth. for the things I did, for the choices I made that ruined both of us. Victor studied him, seeing the lines of guilt etched into Davor's face. You had your chance for redemption long ago, and you chose a different path. What are you doing here now? Davor's shoulders sagged, and he glanced at the ground. I have no home left, Victor. No family. My name is tarnished. My wealth is gone. I sought out your forgiveness once, but you never gave it to me. I thought that if I could come here, to the place where I betrayed you, perhaps I could find the peace I've been searching for. Victor felt the stirrings of an old anger, but also a strange weariness. His life had moved beyond vengeance, but the memory of Davor's role in his suffering could not be erased so easily. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years pressing down on him. Forgiveness is not something I can give you, Davor, Victor said, his voice calm yet firm. But I can show you something. Davor looked up, confusion and hope mingling in his gaze. What? Victor stepped aside, gesturing toward the mountains, where the last rays of the sun faded into twilight. You've come to seek peace, and I cannot grant it. But perhaps in the end, you will find it on your own. Come with me, and I will show you the life you abandoned. The next morning, Victor led Davor through the dense forests surrounding the village, past the streams and hills that had become his sanctuary. Davor, though weak from years of hardship, followed silently, his mind heavy with thoughts of his past. As they walked, Victor spoke of the importance of simplicity, the satisfaction of tending to the earth, of nurturing life, of finding purpose in the small things. He told Davor how his own redemption had come not from seeking forgiveness, but from understanding his past and letting go of his thirst for vengeance. By the time they reached the peak of a hill, overlooking the village and the distant horizon, Davor's shoulders had slumped further, not from defeat, but from the burden of his own reflection. This place, Davor said quietly, it's so peaceful. How can a man like me find peace here? Victor's eyes softened. Peace is not something given. It is something earned through the choices we make, each day, every moment. You may never undo the harm you caused, but you can choose how you live from this point on. Davor stayed in the village for a time, working alongside Victor and the others, learning the lessons of humility and simplicity. It was not an easy path, but over time he began to shed the arrogance and anger that had once defined him. Yet, though he found a measure of peace, he knew that he would never be truly free of the weight of his past. And so the story continued, where revenge had once been the only force that drove Victor. The threads of forgiveness, redemption, and personal growth slowly wove a more intricate tapestry. The legacy of betrayal had not been erased, but it had been transformed, one small step at a time. In the quiet moments of reflection, Victor often thought of Sophia and Luca, of the choices they had made, and of the lives they had rebuilt. Though their stories were their own, the threads of their experiences were woven into his as well. The truth of vengeance, he had learned, was that it could never bring peace. It could only bring the silence of empty victory. And now, at the end of his days, Victor had come to understand that true peace is not found in what we seek from others, but in what we choose to let go of within ourselves.